This morning, before the world asks anything of you, before the noise rises and the weight of yesterday tries to follow you into today, pause for a holy moment. Breathe. You have carried enough. There are battles you've been fighting with clenched fists and tired hearts, battles of fear, of uncertainty, of pain you don't always speak aloud. Yet this morning arrives with a gentle invitation: you do not have to fight alone. Today we choose trust over tension. We choose surrender over striving. We choose to place our worries into hands far wiser than our own. Let God take over your battles today, not because you are weak, but because you are brave enough to release what was never meant to crush your spirit. In this morning prayer, we loosen our grip on control and open our hearts to faith, believing that what we lay down in trust, God will lift with grace. We were taught, many of us, that strength lives in clenched jaws and sleepless nights, that courage means standing tall even when the knees tremble, that victory belongs only to those who never let go. We learn to admire the ones who carry the heaviest loads without complaint, who bleed quietly, who smile while the storm rages inside them. And so we grew up believing that if we loosen our grip, even for a moment, the world will call us weak. But life in its patient wisdom eventually pulls us close and whispers a different truth. Surrender is not the act of giving up. It is the act of giving over. There is a difference, vast and holy, between laying down your weapons and laying down your worth. You do not lose yourself when you surrender to God. You return to yourself. You step out of the exhausting performance of pretending you are in control of everything, and you step into the quiet power of trust. And trust, real trust, requires more strength than fear ever demanded. There comes a morning, perhaps this morning, when your spirit is tired of fighting battles it never chose. Battles of proving, battles of surviving, battles of holding everything together while your hands are shaking. You wake up and realize that your strength has been stretched thin, not because you are incapable, but because you have been trying to play the role of savior in your own life. Surrender arrives in that moment, not as failure, but as relief. It is the deep exhale after holding your breath for too long. To surrender to God is to say, I have done what I can, and now I trust you to do what I cannot. That sentence alone carries the weight of humility and the lift of freedom. It acknowledges effort without worshiping it. It honors responsibility without letting it become a burden that breaks the back of the soul. When you surrender, you are not stepping away from life. You are stepping into alignment with something greater than your fear. Strength, real strength, is not loud. It does not need applause or recognition. It does not shout its achievements from the rooftops. Strength often looks like a bowed head, wet with tears, and a heart that still dares to hope. It looks like a person who has been hurt, disappointed, misunderstood, and yet chooses faith over bitterness. That choice to trust when evidence argues otherwise is the muscle of the spirit, and it grows only when it is used. We must tell ourselves the truth. Control has never loved us back. Control has promised safety and delivered anxiety. It has promised certainty and delivered exhaustion. We hold tighter, thinking that if we manage every detail, we can prevent pain. But pain finds its way in regardless. Because life is not something to be dominated, it is something to be lived. Surrender teaches us that peace does not come from managing outcomes, but from trusting the one who walks with us through them. When you surrender to God, you are not shrinking. You are expanding. You are making room for grace to move where fear once stood guard. You are allowing divine strength to flow into the places where your own strength ran out. This is not weakness, this is wisdom. Even rivers know when to surrender to the sea. Even night knows when to surrender to morning, and neither is diminished by the act. There is a quiet dignity in surrender. It says, I know my limits and I am not ashamed of them. It says, I honor the truth of my humanity. God never asked you to be limitless. God asked you to be faithful. Faithfulness means showing up with what you have, not punishing yourself for what you lack. Surrender is the moment you stop measuring yourself against impossible standards and start resting in divine sufficiency. Some of us resist surrender because we fear disappointment. We fear that if we let go, we will be let down. But surrender to God is not blind trust. It is rooted trust. It is built on the quiet testimony of survival, on the evidence that you are still here after everything that tried to break you. Look at your life. Look at the chapters you thought would be the end of you. You did not carry yourself through those storms alone. Something held you. Something steadied you. Something whispered, "Keep going," when your own voice was too tired to speak. Surrender is strength because it demands honesty. It demands that you admit when you are afraid, when you are uncertain, when you do not know what comes next. And in that honesty, healing begins. God does not work best with perfection. God works best with truth. When you surrender, you stop hiding behind bravado and start standing in authenticity. You bring your whole self, your faith and your doubt, your hope and your hurt, and you lay it down without pretense. There's also courage in trusting God with your battles, because it means releasing the outcome. It means accepting that the victory may not look the way you imagined. But surrender teaches you that peace is not found only in winning. It is found in being held. Sometimes the miracle is not that the battle disappears, but that you are no longer crushed beneath it. Sometimes the victory is the calm that settles in your spirit while the storm still rages outside. Do not confuse surrender with passivity. You still act. You still move. You still love, work, dream, and strive. But you do so without the desperation that comes from believing everything depends on you. You do so with a steady heart, knowing that you are supported by a strength greater than your own. Surrender shifts your posture from frantic to faithful, from strained to steady, from fearful to free. And freedom, real freedom, is the fruit of surrender. Freedom from the need to control every outcome. Freedom from the shame of not being enough. Freedom from the exhausting lie that rest must be earned through suffering. When you surrender, you give yourself permission to rest in God's care, to believe that your life is not a mistake and your struggles are not wasted. So let surrender rise in you this morning, not as white flag of defeat, but as a banner of trust. Let it remind you that you were never meant to fight every battle with your bare hands. Let it teach you that strength can be soft, that courage can be quiet, that faith can be firm even when your voice trembles. You are not weak for letting God take over. You are wise, you are brave. You are finally choosing peace over pride, and that choice, dear heart, is one of the strongest you will ever make. Morning arrives like a promise that has not yet been broken. It comes quietly, without announcement, sliding light across the edges of the dark and asking nothing more of you than your willingness to wake up. Before the world finds its voice, before the noise of obligation clears its throat, morning offers you a sacred pause. In that pause lives possibility. In that pause lives power. And for the soul that understands its language, morning becomes the hour when faith breathes deepest. There is something holy about the first moments of the day. Your heart is still unarmored, your thoughts not yet crowded with the demands of others. You have not yet put on the heavy coat of expectation. In this tender space, faith speaks softly, and if you are willing to listen, it will tell you truths that are harder to hear once the day grows loud. Morning is when trust is easiest to plant because the soil of the Spirit has not yet been trampled. We often underestimate the weight of beginnings. We rush through them, eager to get to what we think matters more. But beginnings shape everything that follows. How you greet the morning often determines how you carry the afternoon and how you survive the night. When you begin your day with faith, you do not eliminate struggle, but you redefine it. You choose to face whatever comes not as a solitary fighter, but as a companion soul. Morning prayer is not a ritual for the perfect. It is a lifeline for the honest. It is not about eloquent words or flawless belief. It is about presence. It is about turning your face toward God before turning it toward the world. In the morning, your fears are still half asleep, your doubts still rubbing their eyes. Faith, if invited in early, takes the front seat before anxiety has time to grab the wheel. There is a reason the heart feels heavier at night and lighter in the morning. Night gathers the unfinished business of the day, stacks worry upon worry, and asks you to carry it into your dreams. Morning, by contrast, offers release. It says you survived, you are still here, you have another chance. Faith flourishes in that reminder. It grows when you realize that every sunrise is evidence that endings are not final, and mercy renews itself without being asked. To meet God in the morning is to declare, quietly but firmly, that your life will not be led by urgency alone. It is to say that before emails, before responsibilities, before the long list of things you must do, you choose to remember who you are and whose you are. That remembrance steadies the spirit. It acts like an anchor dropped deep into the ocean of your being, holding you steady while the waves of the day rise and fall. Morning faith does not demand certainty. It only asks for openness. You can come tired. You can come unsure. You can come carrying yesterday's disappointment, like a bruise that still aches. God is not offended by your questions in the morning light. In fact, morning is often when questions feel safest, when hope has not yet been crowded out by habit. In those early hours, faith is less about answers and more about alignment, lining your heart up with trust before the world tries to pull it apart. There is power in choosing faith before fear has had its say. Fear loves to predict disaster, to rehearse worst-case scenarios, to speak in the voice of urgency. Morning prayer interrupts that pattern. It reminds fear that it is not in charge. It places faith at the center and lets the rest of the day orbit around it. This is not denial, this is discipline. It is the discipline of choosing where your attention rests. When you pray in the morning, you are not trying to convince God to bless your plans. You are asking to be shaped by divine wisdom. You are saying, order my steps, guard my thoughts, teach me how to move through this day with grace. That kind of prayer changes how you respond to difficulty. It softens sharp reactions. It slows impulsive words. It gives you the space to breathe before you break. Morning is also when gratitude finds its clearest voice. Even before circumstances improve, you can thank God for breath, for awareness, for the simple miracle of being alive. Gratitude in the morning does not ignore pain. It places pain in a larger context. It reminds you that while not everything is good, something is always worthy of thanks. And that awareness becomes fuel for faith, carrying you through moments when belief feels thin. The world will try to claim your morning. It will urge you to scroll, to rush, to worry, to prepare for battles that have not yet arrived. But faith asks you to linger. It asks you to sit with the quiet long enough to hear your own heartbeat, to recognize that you are not alone in it. Morning faith is an act of resistance. It resists despair. It resists chaos. It resists the lie that you must face the day unarmed. When you start your day with God, you carry that connection with you like a melody that hums beneath the noise. You may forget it at times. You may lose the rhythm in moments of stress, but it is there ready to be remembered. That is the gift of the morning hour. It plants something in you that can be returned to again and again. Faith practiced in the morning becomes muscle memory for the soul. Over time, it trains your heart to reach upward instead of inward when pressure comes. It teaches you that trust is not reserved for emergencies. It is meant to be a daily posture, and like all postures, it is easier to maintain when you set it early. There will be mornings when faith feels effortless, when hope rises with the sun and prayer feels like conversation. And there will be mornings when faith feels heavy, when words come slowly and belief feels borrowed. Both are holy. Both are welcome. The power of morning faith is not found in consistency of feeling, but in consistency of showing up. You come as you are, and that is enough. So honor the morning. Guard it gently. Let it be the place where your soul checks in before stepping out. Let it be the hour when you hand over your worries, not because they have vanished, but because you trust they do not define you. Morning is the power hour of faith because it reminds you day after day that you begin again, and beginning again with God is one of the most powerful acts a human heart can make. Anxiety does not announce itself loudly at first. It slips in softly, like a shadow stretching across the floor when the light begins to change. It settles into the corners of the mind, whispering questions that sound like caution but feel like fear. What if this goes wrong? What if you are not enough? What if tomorrow demands more than you can give? Anxiety thrives on uncertainty, and it feeds on the illusion that you must solve everything alone. Trust, by contrast, does not rush. It does not compete for attention or raise its voice to be heard. Trust arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, like a calm hand resting on your shoulder when your thoughts are racing. It does not promise that trouble will disappear, but it offers something far more sustaining, the assurance that you will not face it alone. And in that assurance, anxiety begins to lose its grip. We live in a world that rewards worry. We are told that if we are anxious enough, prepared enough, alert enough, we might prevent pain from finding us. Anxiety disguises itself as responsibility, as foresight, as care. But over time, it becomes a heavy companion, demanding constant vigilance and offering little rest. It keeps the mind busy and the heart tired. Trust, on the other hand, invites rest without asking you to abandon responsibility. It asks you to carry what is yours and release what is not. To trust God is not to deny reality, it is to see reality through a wider lens. Anxiety narrows your vision until all you can see is the threat directly in front of you. Trust widens that vision, reminding you of the countless times you have been carried through moments you thought would undo you. It calls your attention to the quiet evidence of grace woven throughout your life, moments of unexpected help, unearned mercy and strength that arrived just when you needed it. Anxiety is loud because it is afraid of silence. In silence, trust has room to grow. When you sit quietly, when you breathe deeply, when you stop rehearsing disasters that have not yet happened, trust begins to speak. It does not argue with anxiety, it outlasts it. It waits patiently, knowing that fear eventually exhausts itself. And when fear grows tired, trust remains. There is a sacred exchange that happens when you choose trust over anxiety. You do not force anxiety out. You simply stop feeding it. You stop giving it every spare thought, every quiet moment, every ounce of your imagination. Instead, you offer those moments to God. You say, I do not know how this will turn out, but I trust you to walk with me through it. That sentence alone can slow a racing heart and steady a trembling spirit. Trust does not require you to feel calm before you choose it. Often, trust is chosen in the presence of anxiety, not its absence. You can be afraid and faithful at the same time. You can acknowledge your worry without letting it rule you. Trust is not the elimination of fear. It is the decision to place fear in its proper place. It says you may speak, but you will not lead. Anxiety focuses on control, what you can manage, predict, or prevent. Trust focuses on relationship. Who is with you, who holds you, who sees beyond what you can see. When you trust God, you shift from asking, how will I handle this, to asking, who will I become as I walk through this with God? That shift changes everything. It turns survival into transformation. There is a gentleness to trust that anxiety does not understand. Anxiety is sharp-edged, urgent, relentless. Trust is soft but strong, like water that shapes stone over time. It does not demand immediate results. It allows for process, for growth, for mystery. Trust teaches you that not every question needs an immediate answer, and not every problem needs to be solved today. As trust takes root, anxiety begins to loosen its hold on the body as well as the mind. Shoulders relax. Breathing deepens. Sleep comes a little easier. This is not magic. It is alignment. The body responds to what the spirit believes. When the spirit rests in trust, the body follows. Peace becomes less of an event and more of a rhythm. Trust also invites compassion for yourself and for others. Anxiety often turns inward, harsh and demanding. It criticizes every misstep and magnifies every flaw. Trust, however, reminds you that you are human, learning, growing, becoming. It allows you to make mistakes without condemning yourself. It lets you extend grace to others because you are no longer operating from a place of scarcity and fear. There will be days when anxiety returns, knocking at the door of your thoughts, insisting that it has something important to say. On those days, trust does not shame you for feeling afraid. It simply invites you to sit down and listen to a deeper truth. It reminds you that you have survived uncertainty before. It reminds you that God's faithfulness is not fragile, not dependent on your perfect belief, not threatened by your questions. Trust quietly replaces anxiety, not by overpowering it, but by outgrowing it. Over time, you notice that what once sent you spiraling now only gives you pause. What once kept you awake now sends you to prayer. What once made you feel alone now reminds you to reach outward instead of inward. This is the quiet work of trust, unfolding day by day, choice by choice. When you trust God, you give yourself permission to live in the present instead of being trapped in imagined futures. Anxiety pulls you forward into scenarios that may never happen. Trust anchors you in the now, where grace is always available. It teaches you that today has enough of its own concerns and enough strength to meet them. Trust does not promise a life without storms. It promises a shelter within them. It does not remove the waves, but it teaches you how to float. It does not silence every fear, but it reminds you which voice to follow. And slowly, gently, almost imperceptibly, anxiety begins to step aside. So let trust do its quiet work in you. Let it settle into your bones and soften the places that have been tense for too long. Let it remind you that you are held, guided, and never abandoned. Anxiety may visit, but trust can live there. And where trust makes its home, peace will eventually follow. There are wars that never leave bruises on the skin, yet leave the spirit aching. They are fought in the quiet hours, in the pauses between breaths, in the spaces where memory and fear meet. These battles do not announce themselves with noise or spectacle. They move silently through the heart, shaping moods, influencing choices, bending hope until it feels fragile. And too often you blame yourself for struggling with enemies you cannot name. But hear this truth gently and let it settle. Not every battle you face is meant to be fought with your hands. Some are meant to be entrusted. Some are already being handled in ways your eyes cannot perceive and your mind cannot measure. God fights battles you cannot see, and the evidence of that truth is written across your survival. You have mistaken invisibility for absence. Just because you cannot see the struggle does not mean it is not real, and just because you cannot see God working does not mean God is not present. The most important things in life, love, breath, courage, faith, are invisible, yet they sustain everything. In the same way, divine intervention often happens beneath the surface, where roots grow before fruit appears. There are moments when you feel unreasonably tired, when joy feels distant for no clear reason, when heaviness follows you even on good days. These are not always signs of weakness. Sometimes they are signs that a deeper battle is taking place, one that does not belong to you alone. God sees the pressures you cannot articulate, the emotional labor you perform without acknowledgement, the quiet endurance you practice daily, and God moves within those unseen places with precision and care. You may think your struggle is simply about circumstance, a job, a relationship, a decision, but beneath that visible layer may lie fear, grief, insecurity, or wounds carried from long ago. God understands the complexity of your inner life. While you are addressing what you can name, God is addressing what you cannot. While you are trying to manage outcomes, God is reshaping foundations. There is comfort in knowing that you are not solely responsible for every outcome. That relief alone can soften a heart hardened by constant vigilance. God fights unseen battles by shielding you from dangers you never encounter, by redirecting paths you did not know would lead to harm, by quieting storms before they ever reach your door. Many of the worst things you feared never happened, not by accident, but by grace. Unseen battles are often spiritual, emotional, and generational. They travel through family lines, through patterns of behavior and belief that were handed down without permission. God works in these deeper currents, interrupting cycles, healing inherited pain, loosening chains you did not know how to name. When you choose faith, you give God permission to move not just in your present, but in your past and future as well. Sometimes God's fighting looks like delay. You wanted immediate answers, quick resolutions, clear signs. Instead, you were given time to grow, time to learn, time to become strong enough to carry what you asked for. What felt like waiting was often protection. What felt like silence was often preparation. God was fighting a battle you could not see, one that required patience rather than action. You may never know how many times your heart was spared from breaking beyond repair. How many decisions were softened before they hardened you? How many conversations never happened because they would have wounded you deeply? God's defense is not always dramatic. It is often subtle, woven into the ordinary, hidden in the fabric of daily life. There is also the battle within, the war between hope and despair, between trust and fear. You wake up some days already tired, already bracing yourself for disappointment. Yet something in you still rises. You still get out of bed. You still try. That resilience is not accidental. It is evidence that God is at work in places you cannot access on your own. When you felt like giving up but did not, something stronger than willpower was holding you upright. God fights unseen battles by shaping your character in quiet ways. Strength is built in repetition. Wisdom is born in reflection. Compassion grows in suffering. While you are focused on results, God is focused on formation. You may not see the progress because it is happening internally, but one day you will look back and realize you are no longer the same person who once struggled to survive moments you now navigate with grace. Do not underestimate the power of divine restraint. Sometimes God's greatest victory is stopping you from moving too fast, speaking too soon, reacting too harshly. You thought you were being blocked, but you were being protected from your own impatience, from unnecessary pain, from choices that would have cost you dearly. God fights battles by guarding you against yourself when needed. There will be seasons when you feel unsupported, when prayers feel unanswered, when faith feels thin. In those seasons, remember that silence does not mean abandonment. Surgeons are quiet during delicate operations. So is God when the work is precise. The unseen does not mean unattended. It often means sacred. Trusting that God fights unseen battles requires humility. It requires acknowledging that you do not have full access to the story of your life. You see chapters, God sees the entire book. You see moments, God sees movements. When you release the need to understand everything, you make room for peace to enter. One day, perhaps unexpectedly, clarity will arrive. You will understand why certain doors never opened, why certain relationships ended, why certain dreams took longer than you hoped. And you will realize that while you were questioning, God was defending. While you were worrying, God was working. While you were fighting what you could see, God was handling what you could not. So rest your spirit. You are not neglecting responsibility by trusting God with the unseen. You are acknowledging reality. Some battles require more than human effort. Some wars are won through surrender, prayer, and patience. Let God fight what lies beyond your sight. Let that truth lighten your heart and steady your steps. You are not alone in this life, even when it feels that way. There is a presence moving quietly on your behalf, protecting, guiding, and strengthening you. God fights battles you can't see, and because of that, you are still standing, still breathing, still becoming. Healing rarely arrives with trumpet sounds or grand announcements. It comes softly, like dawn easing its way into a long night, asking only that you make room for it. And room, in a life crowded by fear, control, and unspoken pain, is not easily found. We fill every corner of our days with effort, every silence with worry, every pause with planning. We carry hurts like heirlooms, convinced that laying them down would somehow erase our strength. But healing requires space, and space is born the moment surrender enters the room. Surrender is the gentle act of opening your hands. It is choosing not to clutch every hurt, every regret, every unanswered question as proof of your endurance. You have endured that truth needs no further evidence. Healing begins when you stop proving how much you can carry and start allowing yourself to be cared for. God does not ask you to explain your pain before healing it. God asks you to trust enough to set it down. For many of us, pain has become familiar. It has shaped our routines, influenced our relationships, and informed how we see ourselves. We learn to live around it, to work through it, to smile despite it. But familiarity is not the same as wholeness. Healing asks a deeper question: what might happen if you stopped organizing your life around your wounds? What might rise if you made space for restoration instead of survival? Surrender creates that space by releasing the illusion that healing must be earned. You do not have to suffer more to deserve peace. You do not have to explain every scar to be worthy of rest. Healing is not a reward for endurance. It is a gift of grace. When you surrender to God, you step out of the economy of earning and into the abundance of receiving. There is a tenderness required in healing that control cannot provide. Control tightens the muscles of the soul. It keeps you braced for impact, always anticipating the next blow. Surrender softens that posture. It allows you to rest long enough for God to touch the places you have guarded for years, and those places, tender, bruised, forgotten, are often where the deepest healing is needed. Healing is not always about removing pain. Sometimes it is about changing your relationship to it. Surrender allows you to say, "This hurt does not define me. This chapter is not the whole story." In that declaration, power shifts. Pain loses its authority. It becomes part of your history, not the architect of your future. There are wounds you have named and wounds you have buried. Some are sharp and immediate, others are dull and lingering, flaring up when you least expect them. God sees them all. When you surrender, you stop filtering your pain into what seems acceptable and what feels shameful. You bring it all, the anger, the grief, the confusion, the weariness, and you place it before a God who is not startled by your truth. Healing requires honesty, and surrender makes honesty possible. It invites you to stop pretending that you are fine when you are fractured. It gives you permission to admit that some days are heavier than others, that some memories still sting, that some prayers feel more like sighs. God does not heal the version of you that performs strength. God heals the version of you that tells the truth. As space opens, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice where pain has been living in your body, in tight shoulders, shallow breaths, restless sleep. Surrender allows your body to participate in healing alongside your spirit. You begin to breathe deeper. You begin to rest without guilt. You begin to recognize that your body has been speaking for years, asking for gentleness, asking for care. Healing also unfolds in layers. Surrender does not rush the process. It trusts timing. It understands that some wounds took years to form and will take time to heal. God works patiently, steadily, honoring your pace. There is no pressure to be over it or to move on before you are ready. Surrender teaches you that healing is not linear. It is relational. It deepens as trust deepens. When you surrender, you also make space for forgiveness, not as a demand, but as a possibility. Forgiveness does not mean excusing harm or forgetting pain. It means releasing the hold that resentment has on your heart. Healing often requires letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. Surrender allows you to grieve what was lost while still believing in what can be restored. Healing touches your identity as well. Pain has a way of rewriting who you believe yourself to be. It tells you that you are broken, fragile, unworthy. Surrender counters that narrative. It reminds you that you are beloved, whole in God's eyes, and continually becoming. As healing unfolds, you begin to see yourself not as damaged goods, but as a story still being written. There is also healing in learning to receive. Many of us are skilled at giving but uncomfortable with being given to. We help others heal while ignoring our own need for care. Surrender invites you to receive love without suspicion, rest without apology, joy without fear that it will be taken away. It teaches you that vulnerability is not weakness, it is the doorway through which healing enters. Sometimes healing arrives quietly, without a clear moment of arrival. One day you realize that a memory no longer stings as sharply. A conversation that once would have undone you now leaves you steady. A fear that once ruled your decisions now only whispers. This is the fruit of surrender, change so gentle you almost miss it, yet so profound it reshapes your life. Healing also reconnects you to hope. Pain narrows the future, convincing you that tomorrow will simply repeat yesterday's hurt. Surrender widens your vision. It allows you to imagine a life not governed by wounds. It invites you to dream again, to love again, to trust again, not recklessly but courageously. And make no mistake, surrender is an ongoing choice. Healing is not something you accomplish once and then leave behind. It is something you tend, like a garden. Some days require more care than others. Some seasons bring growth, others bring rest. God walks with you through all of it, faithful and attentive, never rushing the process. So if you are tired today, if your spirit feels worn from carrying what was never meant to be yours alone, consider surrender, not as an ending, but as an opening. Let go enough to create space, space for breath, space for grace, space for healing to do its quiet, faithful work. You do not have to force healing. You only have to make room for it. And when you do, God will meet you there, gentle, patient, and full of love, ready to restore what has been hurting for far too long.